So this was RFK's announcement that he was withdrawing as a Democrat candidate for president and announcing instead as an independent. Take a look.
This country is ready for a history-making change. They are ready to reclaim their freedom, their independence. And that's why I'm here today. I'm here to declare myself an independent candidate. United States history.
Okay, that's good. That's good. This is just the guy's stinger at the end of the video. Listen, I like RFK. We talked about this from the moment he declared as a challenger to Joe Biden. I even remember saying at the time, it's kind of tempting to cast your vote for RFK because he is so based on COVID. He's so based on big pharma. He's so based at abolishing the elements of the administrative state, like the CDC and the FDA, that are so corrupt, they allow this profiteering by big pharma that harms all of our families all the time. It's kind of tempting to want to vote for him. And I feel that emotion, especially on the heels of President Trump not handling COVID well. I thought President Trump was a good president for his first 3 years. I did not think he was a good president for his fourth year. I thought he majorly mismanaged COVID. He's partially to blame for elevating Fauci to the position of influence that Fauci ultimately enjoyed. Trump's not responsible for all of Fauci's corruption, of course. Fauci spent an entire career building on that corruption. But even when President Trump was given information that Fauci was corrupt and that the Public Health Administration was siding with Big Pharma over the science, he didn't course correct. He was a proponent of masks. He's still a huge proponent of the vaccine. He shamed red states for reopening during COVID, particularly Georgia, when they wanted to cease and desist with the lockdowns. President Trump pressured them. He claims to this day that he didn't get enough credit for saving lives during COVID. And this is why we'll talk about RFK's record as a Democrat, because he is pretty far leftist. He's pretty based on big pharma, and he's pretty based on COVID, but he is pretty leftist on a lot of other issues that are important to us. But I think when the RNC goes after RFK Jr. and when Trump is reportedly planning to go after RFK, it's the wrong tactic. Because a lot of us like RFK. A lot of us are encouraged and heartened to see a politician who doesn't care about mainstream media hate, who doesn't care about being labeled as a conspiracy theorist, who doesn't care about social ostracization, who is fighting for what is right, who is not trying to couch his political opinions and please validate me, people who hate me. We like RFK. And so I'm not sure that it's a smart tactic to try to vilify someone who is appealing to us. What would be smarter? And I hope the RNC is listening, and I hope the Trump campaign is listening. What would be smarter is to actually identify why a certain percentage of Republicans find RFK appealing. It's not because these Republicans hate Trump. It's not like you're going to have the never-Trumpers and the neocons that are refusing to vote for Trump that want to vote for RFK, 14% of the Republican Party. No. The reason so many Republicans find RFK appealing is because of the contrast between what RFK is offering on COVID and what Trump did during COVID. Because it's still very fresh in people's minds, the impact of the COVID policies that, yes, some of it came from the states, but it was directed by the federal government. The impact of that on our lives, whether it's our businesses, our jobs, our children's education, our medical freedom, that is fresh. It is raw. It is painful. And RFK, there's no doubt in anyone's minds that RFK would never allow that to happen again, that he would dismantle the corrupt apparatus that even allowed it to happen in the first place. And so maybe what the RNC should do, and maybe what the Trump campaign should do, is take a moment of self-reflection and understand your base. Understand what your base feels passionately about. And the base feels passionately about how they were mistreated, how our freedoms were violated, how we were exploited during COVID. And maybe Trump, instead of claiming that he doesn't get the credit he deserves about COVID, instead of pushing this vaccine, instead of excusing himself, elevating Fauci, maybe he takes the correct position on COVID. And if he did that, let me tell you, the vast majority of these 14% of Republicans who would choose RFK over Trump wouldn't vote for RFK. They'd be happy to vote for Trump. But they feel hesitant to vote for Trump because of what Trump's COVID policies did, the harm it inflicted on their lives. And maybe the RNC should also speak up more loudly and powerfully against big pharma on a regular basis instead of just trying to paint RFK Jr. as a leftist. This is what they posted. And they're not wrong about this, by the way. They're not wrong about RFK's record. This is true. I'm going to bring up this RNC tweet and read it to you. That is, if my internet browser decides it wants to work. Well, you guys can see it. I can't for a second. You can get ahead of me reading it. Okay, this is what the RNC research posted and said, there's very little daylight between RFK Jr. and a typical Democrat politician. So here are 23 reasons to oppose the candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He voted for Joe Biden in the 2020 election. He is a self-described Kennedy Democrat. He has admitted his candidacy will take more votes from the Republican candidate than Biden. He is a prolific donor to Democrat candidates dating back to 1985, including to Barack Obama's 2007 campaign. He enthusiastically endorsed Hillary Clinton's 2007 presidential and 2016 presidential campaigns. He calls himself a huge admirer of socialist Bernie Sanders. He praised rabid anti-Semite Louis Farrakhan as a, quote, truly great partner. He supports divisive and unconstitutional affirmative action policies in higher education. He called the NRA a terror group. He compared hog farmers to Osama bin Laden's international terror network. He's repeatedly called for a ban on fossil fuel extraction, including fracking. He praised socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal as good and important and said we ought to be pursuing it. He supports divesting from fossil fuels, imposing a tax on carbon emissions, and eliminating energy subsidies. He vehemently opposes American energy projects, including the Keystone Pipeline. He believes climate change is the, quote, cost of a long-time deadly addiction to coal and oil. He attempted to get ExxonMobil banned from doing business in New York and believes oil company executives should be given the death penalty. He lauded China's 2015 cap-and-trade commitment as revolutionary. He's a huge supporter of the failed Paris Climate Agreement. He supports abortion on demand until birth without limits, quote, in line with today's Democrat Party. He supports tax hikes on hardworking Americans, including AOC's proposed top rate of 70%. He praised Biden's unilateral student loan debt bailout and called the Supreme Court's decision overturning it unfortunate. He once called Republican voters misinformed because they believed in God and don't read the New York Times. He called the 2000 presidential election stolen, quote, under a cloud of dirty tricks, and said Republicans fixed the 2004 presidential election. RNC research concludes by saying, do not be fooled. The only way to reverse America's decline at the hands of Biden is to elect a Republican as president next year. Now, I actually find that tweet to be very interesting. I find it very interesting because RFK Jr. doesn't often talk about his positions on these issues. At least he hasn't in the course of the last few months on the campaign trail. He's mostly talking about Big Pharma. In fact, I suspect that's why he's running for president, because he wants to make that issue known. I suspect he knows he won't win the presidency, but sometimes powerful political figures run for president just to elevate their own platform. It's just how the game is played, for better or for worse. And I suspect that's what RFK Jr. is doing now. And like I said, I don't disagree with anything the RNC said in that tweet. I don't disagree that RFK Jr. is mostly a pretty leftist Democrat who just happens to be totally based and totally correct on Big Pharma, Big Food, and the corruption at the CDC and the FDA. But I still don't think the proper tactic from the RNC and from the Trump campaign is to simply vilify RFK Jr. for all of his leftist positions. If the Trump campaign and the RNC actually want to serve the interests of their voters and their constituents and their base and the party and the country at large, they will stop attacking RFK and instead they will relate to why voters are drawn to RFK, which would mean Trump should disavow the COVID policies that he once imposed. If he did that, I promise that number, that 14% of Republicans who said they'd vote for RFK, that would shrink considerably. I hate to publicly levy a guess about the numbers, but I would guess that would shrink to about 5% of Republicans. It would be a tiny number compared to the number of Democrats who would defect from Joe Biden because they don't believe in anything that Joe Biden is doing and they want some kind of alternative. And they see RFK as, great, another Democrat who's not as corrupt as Joe Biden. They will stick with RFK. But Republicans' minds can be changed if the RNC and Trump campaign handle this correctly. But that requires some humility on the part of both the RNC and Trump and recalibrating what their policies about COVID, the science, the Public Health Administration, the CDC, the FDA, Big Pharma, the vaccine, masks, and lockdowns are. I hope they change it. I hope they change their views. I truly do, because I'm not convinced that the Republican commentary world is correct, that RFK Jr. would spoil Trump's chances. I think, it could change. Public opinion does change. But based on public opinion now, I still think he could be more damaging to Biden's chances if the RNC and Trump handle this correctly